This prayer was written by our survivor sister, and in the original recording, she led us in it. These are her words. Let us enter into a deeper inner silence and become aware of the presence of Spirit Sophia, who stands by us as we journey on in life through all its ups and downs. Let us invoke her presence in our midst on this day, the eve of the celebration of the Feast of the Pentecost, that she may refresh us with her energy and wisdom to carry on her mission in whatever situation we find ourselves at this stage in our lives. We make this prayer in the name of Jesus, our friend and companion on the path that we walk in life. Amen.
Thank you so much for that beautiful opening prayer. And to introduce our interviewers, Penelope and Jon. Jon is an historian. He's a former documentary filmmaker with the BBC, with Channel 4. Can't get better than that, really. And he's now a podcaster with Penelope at historycafe.org, which I do encourage you to pop into. Never ceases to be fascinating. You'll find Jon popping up on the letters page of the tablet. He's in there this week, pouring cold water on the idea that the Latin Mass was what bound the church together from earliest times. And Jon says the Latin liturgy started out as, and has remained, a device to distinguish a privileged cadre of educated and wealthy elite, which metamorphosed into a clergy, and points out that 95% or more of Christians were illiterate back in the day. So, again, Jon, you never cease to be interesting and cause us all to think.
Thank you, Mary.
Penelope begged me not to introduce her because she's one of us. But I might not introduce you, Penelope, but I do welcome you. It's always such a great joy to have your energy and your enthusiasm and your ability to express yourself amongst us. Penelope and Jon travelled to India earlier this year, specifically to meet many of the people here today. And we are just so grateful that they've returned to bring you to us and to help us all to get to know each other just a little bit better. So thank you, Penelope and Jon, and I'm very happy to hand it over to you. Thanks.
Mary, thank you. And thank you. As we say, you wrote that opening prayer, and it's you who's bravely taken on the Catholic Church in your demand for justice for the clerical sexual abuse you suffered over 2 years when you were the superior of your convent. You stand for many thousands of religious sisters across the world who have remained silent about their clerical abuse rather than risk what's happened to you being punished for bringing the church's name into disrepute. Now, a bit of background. Kocharani took me and Jon to meet Sister and her companions where they live, cut off from their order. And we had a little meal with them, and we were just struck by how generous, peaceful, loving, and funny they are, in spite of all they've faced. And now at that time, they were hoping to make a living or to help their living, because as we say, they've got no money from the order, by doing some sewing. And we'd initially hoped to get you to buy some wonderful bags they made with the slogan, "Stand by me," as a way of showing your support. But as you'll hear, when I go on with my introduction, the situation has changed and that's no longer possible. So the focus of the webinar tonight is supporting the cause for justice for clerical sexual abuse and why it's important to have an ally, to be an ally. Jon, sorry.
So one of the things that you've got to say here is that much of Sister's case is sub judice. And that means to say that quite a lot of this introduction, for example, will be redacted from the recording as it later goes on.
When Sister took the decision to disclose the abuse back in 2016 via the accepted church authorities, that was 9 years ago, she felt the full force of the church's anger. She was immediately removed from her position as superior of the convent and removed from her position as director of the care home that she ran there and had run there since it began. And this was a deliberate move to sever relations between her and the local community. She only went to the police after 2 years of hearing nothing sensible from the church.
It's very hard to imagine the sacrifice that her companions in her order made. These were women who literally laid down their way of life for their friend. As you can imagine, it's been and continues to be a very stressful thing to do. It's such a brave testimony, extraordinary. Well, we're going to talk to Kochirani Abraham next. Many of you will know Kochirani Abraham very well. For those of you who don't, she describes herself as a feminist theologian, gender researcher, and trainer, which seems a very formal way to me of describing just a very wonderful and warm human being. Former national convener of the Indian Christian women's movement, committed to justice concerned in the Indian church and society. She, of course, contributed to Hans Weingard's last book, Why Christ Rejects All Church Prejudice Against Women, and also wrote a book which you may not know so well called My Prophetic Struggle, the Narakal Story, which is the story of religious sisters she has supported in their fight against the parish when the school they founded was simply illegally stolen from them. Extraordinary. Well, Kochi took us to visit her friends, including Augustine Vatterly. It was an absolutely wonderful odyssey for us all. And it was absolutely obvious to us that there was a very close bond between Kochi and particularly the sisters in the house. So I suppose the question really is, Kochi, I mean, what made you stand by Sister and her companions? What drew you to this case and to their particular situation?
Thank you very much, Jon and Penelope, for organizing this, particularly to Root and Branch. It is very meaningful for us, for the sisters and for us who are walking with the sisters. I was really confounded by this news, knowing the culture, which is highly clericalized and where nuns generally take a very compliant stand before clergymen. Adding to my confusion was the narrative that since abused her for 2 years, it could not be rape, but a consensual affair. I found something of a mismatch in this narrative because I know very well that, particularly in the context of India, that if there was any element of consent, she would not dare to file a case. And so I decided to verify the truth of her story directly. And after a week of intensive search, I managed to get a contact number. And finally, that took me, along with the sister, where Jon mentioned the story of Nyarakal, who is the protagonist of that story, Sister Annie Jays. Both of us went for the first time. I think on my first visit to the sisters, I spent about 4 to 5 hours and my doubts were clarified. Basically, I got a grasp of their congregational culture and understood clearly that the sexual abuse was just one part of the overall abusive relationship that I had with the nuns of this congregation. The sisters told me that he was totally in control of every aspect of their lives. After verifying the facts, the next immediate step that I took was to inform my friends in the Indian Women Theologians Forum. Most of you must be knowing. Many of us have been part of Root and Branch programs. Indian Women Theologians Forum is a collective of feminist theologians in India. And because they were very concerned about the sister. The initial communications were all by WhatsApp and Zoom. And then after a few individual visits, one of our friends, who was the director then of a women's organization in Pune, suggested that we meet in person to see how we can support the sisters in their struggle for justice. Thus, in April 2019, That was about 6 months after the case was filed. We had a 2-day meeting on this issue, during which we also had a feminist lawyer practicing in the Supreme Court with us, who clarified to us the complexities of a case of this nature. It was at this meeting that we decided collectively to support the sisters, and we called ourselves Sisters in Solidarity. And that
Got you.
is how.
So Kochu, it's a very long story, and I'm just thinking we've got several other people who are going to continue the story. Can I just ask you to tell us? It's an extraordinary story, and I'm sure people can find out more about all the rest of it, because it's an amazingly long tale. But what's it meant to you? Just personally, just very briefly, what's it meant to you? What's it given to you in return, being an ally to these extraordinary people, in your spiritual life, in your personal life?
For me, it is, it's part of my life now, to be part of their lives. It gives me a sense of mission, a mission that we are called to live in the church today. That is how we started with the Stand By Me also, because their concerns became my concerns. Some of us from this SIS group, we were very concerned that our sisters were left without any mission and they didn't know what to do. Each day they would get up and they were at a loss. So in that context, he used to tell me what to do. We didn't know, we just eat and sleep. And when we contacted some friends from Bombay, and we knew they were into tailoring, so we got them to design bags and we sold a whole lot during the Advent market in Bombay. When we were sort of preparing for this sale, one of our friends from Bombay, he said, we need to brand it. And she suggested, why don't we call it Stand By Me? And we said it can be, a kind of brand name, not only for them, but also for supporters of gender-based violence. That is how Stand By Me was born. So I think it is, as I said earlier, I feel very privileged to be part of this process of accompanying the sisters. And I'm so happy that Stand By Me now has a ripple effect, particularly with Root and Branch taking it up.
Yeah,
and would include sharing a conviction that standing by a survivor of clergy sexual abuse in her struggle for justice is an integral element of mission today for us Catholics, particularly with feminist sensibilities.
Yeah, absolutely. We met your wonderful friend who designed the bags when we were in Cochin. She was with you there. And what an extraordinary group of people brought together. And there's no doubt at all that the standing by has also brought other people together and has given them an extraordinary sense of purpose and an extraordinary sense of love amongst those people. It was completely obvious when you were there with you guys. Kochi, fantastic. We'll hear more later on because there'll be questions and things. Fantastic, great.
I'm now going to go to Virginia. So most of you, thank you, Kochu. Most of you will know Virginia very well, but for anyone who doesn't, she's a theologian, writer, and activist, a member of the executive of the Catholic Women's Council, CWC, representing Asia. She's a trustee at a women's legal NGO and a charitable educational NGO, founder of the Indian Women Theologians Forum, and member of the Indian Christian Women's Movement. She also occupied several positions in the church for the empowerment of women at the Archdiocese of Mumbai or Bombay, the Catholic Bishops' Conference of India, and the Federation of Asian Bishops' Conferences. But Virginia, what does it mean to you? Oh God, I'm looking at the wrong, keeps moving my paper. What made you decide to get involved with SIS? And I know you've done particular things to help them. Would you like to tell us about it? And then obviously, what has it meant to you to be an ally?
Actually, my positions in the church, where I held at the national level and in the international level. I was meeting a number of women, particularly sisters, in the meetings that I held. And many sisters came to me privately and told me about abuse by clergy. And I kept talking about it in different meetings of women. And I even spoke to a mother general, and she says, we settle this in house. And I thought it was not right, because what did this really mean in house? I later came to understand that in house meant that the sister was silenced, but the perpetrator was
Yeah.
scot free. You know, so the in-house meant injustice to the sister. um, in 2008 I actually got three cases actually that came to me. One was a sister from the Philippines who was abused by a priest from India. The other one was a lay person, young girl, actually two young girls, who came to me telling me about their abuse during retreat. And the third was at a meeting in Taiwan when we spoke about this, where a sister spoke about her abuse. And I said, I have to write an article about it. And I published an article about it in UCAN News. And you won't believe, after the article was published, UCAN was forced to bring it down. But the article is still on the archives of SNAP, bishopaccountability.org. That
Yeah.
article is still there. When I published that article, a sisters NGO called Srivani contacted me, and we discussed about having a meeting on this topic. And she had a lot of pressure not to organize such a meeting. We finally all called the meeting Gender Justice in the Church. And we had the meeting somewhere in 2010 or something. And we discussed it, and we even brought out a book. I think Astrid is one of the editors of that book called Gender Justice in the Church. And on this issue. So we were continuing to talk about this issue. In 2018, when this article came in the newspaper about the rape, I told Kochurani, we have to go and meet that sister. You have to go. I asked her, are you close there? And so she tried several times, I remember, to go there. But because of the police protection, but finally she did succeed, and we got in touch with the sisters. So we got in touch with the sisters, and since then, we got deeply involved in their lives, and we came. I remember at that Srivani meeting on gender justice in the church, I was asked to write the keynote address. And at that time, I was still in the US, and I read a lot of books on abuse of religious sisters in the church from the Library of Congress in the US. And I really researched the article, and I came to the conclusion that there can never be consensual sex between two people of unequal power. And I still maintain that. There cannot be consensual sex between two people of unequal power. And the bishops, every abuse, they describe it as consensual sex. And I feel that this cannot happen. So that was very clear. Anyway, we got to know their story. We came to know them very closely, and we began to support them. I remember the women of cis contributing towards helping the sisters study, and helping the sisters to stabilize, and yes, then helping them to do
I
something
believe
and
the
making
thing
their
is that
lives meaningful.
very quickly before we move on to Astrid, because as we're up against time, and we will come back to you with questions. What have you got out of this work, helping these people who need you to be their voice?
Personally, I'm a person who is very, very strong on the issue of justice. I've always stood for justice on many issues, not just this. I've stood for justice for women, for domestic workers, and wherever I've seen injustice, I feel that it is my Christian faith to fight injustice. And I see this issue of abuse of religious sisters in the church as a very grave injustice. In fact, I've written an article for the Roman Theological Journal Concilium, and there I have said that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And the thing is that the priesthood has absolute power
Yeah, it does.
over people. And spiritual power is a very potent power, particularly over a religious sister. So
Okay.
it is so easy to abuse, you know? And therefore, my last conclusion of that article was the priesthood has to change.
Yeah.
The priesthood has to change. It has too much of power, and this power is being abused.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, listen, thank you, Virginia. Very well put and very clear.
Jordan,
John,
and I've been doing some research on the very early church. You know, it's the 1700th anniversary of the Council of Nicaea, 325. Way out of my comfort zone. I'm not an ancient historian at all. One of the things I find is that in council after council after council after council in the early church, one of the things they try to stop is bishops having mistresses, as they describe them. And they go on to, we're talking about 1700 years ago. This is not something that's just happened over the last few years. This is something that's been going on and on for a very long time. Anyway, watch this space. Hopefully you'll be able to write something about that in all due course. So thank you, Virginia.
thanks, Virginia.
Extraordinary, amazing work you do. I think we're going to talk to Astrid next. I think
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah.
Another member of SIS.
And that's a number of SIS, yes, and somebody else who we met, and it was wonderful to meet Astrid and her lovely Hindu husband, Kalpesh, which is important, I think. Astrid Lobo Gajiwala is a feminist theologian, activist, award-winning writer. In fact, her doctorate is in medicine, and her specialism is in tissue banking, biomedical ethics and theology. So, like Virginia, she played a key role in the genesis of the Indian Bishops' Commission for Women. She told us that she walks a very difficult tightrope working within a patriarchal, clerical, hierarchical church, and at the same time demanding an end to discrimination and injustice within it. So Astrid helped to draft the path-breaking gender policy of the Catholic Church of India, and she advises the ancient bishops on gender issues and inter-religious marriage, which she can talk about from great personal experience. Astrid is an executive member of several international church reform bodies and theological associations, and is the founding member of several feminist collectives too. How you have time to do anything in your life, I have no idea, Astrid, but still. She's currently engaged in a project, amazingly, at St. Paul's University in Ottawa entitled Rebuilding Trust in the Church, which strikes me as being a labour of Sisyphus, if ever there was one. The question is, what made you, Astrid, decide this was a cause you could follow? What brought you to that cause in the first place?
So one of the most shocking experiences for me was when I had taken my family. We had gone for a holiday camp with the Jesuits at a Jesuit house. And while I was there, it was just a 2 or 3 day camp. And while I was there, I always make it a point to talk to the helpers. So I went into the kitchen and I saw this woman sitting there working, and I struck up a conversation with her. And it turned out that she had been a nun, and she had been, I don't know what the right word to use, but she had been used by a bishop, and she had actually born a child, a boy, and he had been taken away and was put up in Catholic institutions, and this was her fate. And she was so angry and she was so bitter. So, this was something that really struck me and it really marked me. And ever since then, I was kind of course, this bishop is now no longer alive, because I know a lot of people who try to guess in India who was this bishop, but he's not alive anymore. And anyway, so that was something, I think that was an eye-opener for me. That was the biggest shock. And subsequently, of course, we've been, I've been engaged. We're a group of women, so I've never worked alone. I've always worked in a group. And we were a group of women in Mumbai and from Pune who were taking up issues of clergy sexual abuse. They were, individual cases, and they would come to us. We would try to help as much as we could. And then what happened was in 2002, the Boston scandals hit the headlines. And what we noticed was that everybody was talking about the abuse of minors, but nobody was talking about the abuse of women. And that's when we decided that, Srivani actually spearheaded this meetings, these conventions that we had, one in Mumbai. And one of the outcomes of that convention, the action plan, was to draw up a policy to prevent and address clergy sexual abuse. And actually, this document became a resource subsequently for the Catholic bishops when they brought out their guidelines in 2017. And we were able to understand the issues quickly because we had already gone through all these, this whole search and this journey of understanding the whole issue of clergy sexual abuse. So we could understand how rape paralyzes the victim. We were aware of the silence that surrounds rape, how difficult it is for the women to speak up. And we were also aware of the abuse of power that is at the root of clergy sexual abuse. So for me, the starting point was belief. I never ever doubted. From the beginning, I believed her and I was ready to fight for her cause. So what happened was three of us took this file to the cardinal at that time, who happened to be he was a cardinal in Mumbai. He was the president of the Catholic Bishops' Conference of India. So there were three of us. There was Hazel Delima, a very senior nun and very well respected from the DHM congregation, Sister Noella D'Souza, MCG, and myself. And the idea was that we wanted him to conduct an investigation. He said, this is the case. The FIR was in that file. The police report, the full police report, their investigation that they had done was in that file. So we asked for an internal investigation, but unfortunately, the church authorities took no action, and ultimately the matter went to court. Coach has already told you how we formed Sisters in Solidarity. So I was there in Kerala when this was formed. And for me, one of the what shall I say, learning experiences was that, until I got involved in this case, I only thought of getting justice for the survivor. Okay. But as the days became months and the months became years, I realized how much more was involved. The need for emotional, psychological, and spiritual healing, a process that has taken years and needs constant, dependable, unwavering support in the face of all kinds of onslaughts. So this was a big learning experience for me. In the past 7 years, many of us in the group, I think almost all of us, have visited the survivor and her supporters. We have regular Zoom calls with them. Initially we were thinking, how will we, at the start, it was very difficult for her to speak and, about her experience because it was too close, it was too painful. And so we were wondering how we would get them to speak. And we thought of, I suggested that we do biblical reflections. And that's how we actually started with biblical reflections, where they could reflect using, example stories from the Bible. And that's how we continue even till today. And of course, today the sharing is so much deeper and it's so much more open and freer than it was when we first started some years ago. The other thing that I found was, what struck me was the young sisters who supported. I know that in their zeal, they were there to stand up for what they believed in was right, but I don't think any of them ever anticipated how long it would take and how much it would take out of their lives. And, I also, when their mission was taken away from them, in a sense, they lacked purpose. It was very difficult. I mean, people can get suicidal without a lack of, with a lack of purpose. And so I was very glad that all of us as a group, we kind of brainstormed about it. And then that's when we decided about the higher studies, and we managed to find sponsors for them. So all of them were sponsored and all of them have done higher education. So that's something which I'm really glad, some good that has come out of this. My biggest contribution as an individual has been, like Jon already said in my introduction, I've been in this very difficult situation where I'm fighting the church, but I'm working within the church. And so my biggest contribution has been to try and be a bridge between the survivor and the bishops. And I say this because I know the cardinal and I know the bishop administrator, who I have known for the last more than 30 years, and before they became bishops. And so I have tried to use my, connection with him to plead the cause in various ways for the sisters. So, for instance, I tried initially when this whole thing first started, I tried very hard for the survivor to meet with the cardinal. As you all already know, that he has still not met. she was unable to travel to Mumbai because of the police protection. All their communication has been through letters. As far as the bishop administrator is concerned, again, he communicated largely through letters. But what I did succeed in was getting him to agree to a Zoom meeting. So some years ago, he had the first Zoom meeting after those years of just writing letters. And that was a good meeting, actually. I think it was a very cordial meeting, and he agreed to a few things, which was useful from the physical point of view.
But what's
Just to
interesting,
say that there has been.
I was going to say, what's interesting is how difficult it is to pursue this case from within the church. And when you've got loyalties within the church, and how difficult that is. In fact, probably we ought to talk to Augustine Vitali, because he is Vitali, who is a priest within the church, for whom it's extremely difficult to do these things, and a very brave stand indeed. I mean, maybe it's time we talk to Vitali.
You've got more to tell us, Astrid, but as had everybody. So we're just going to move on to Vitali now, and then hopefully, if there's time at the end, everyone can come in with some other little points. But thank you. Really helpful to hear about how you got there and the bridge and everything else.
Amazing.
Thank you. So, Augustine Bartoli. Thank you, Bartoli. I am for you.
Where is he? Here somewhere.
He's somewhere around. Yep. Hi. You are known as a rebel priest. Now, whether that's a positive description or a negative description depends very much on one's approach to church reform, because I believe that name, rebel priest, was first coined by the church hierarchy when you started to point out corruption closer to home in the church. I have read a lot about the successful campaigns you've been involved in for justice in the secular world, for the landless Dalit families, supporting families affected by displacement to make way for, say, a container terminus or a railway line, or affected by a nuclear power point, or poisoned by river pollution, by Coca-Cola. I think you were arrested then. You were doing all this, and sometimes you had bishops supporting you, until you started to point your finger at the corruption in the church. And then that became more difficult. So, John and I spent an afternoon with you at your parish.
Fantastic.
On the waterways outside Cochin. You did invite us to address a packed cultural evening and tell them what it means to be a parish. But in fact, they didn't need to hear from us, because they can see from you show them daily, that being a member of a parish doesn't mean following rituals or institutions. It's about helping others, taking action to help others. So it's wonderful to have you here. And please, tell us about why it's important, against all the odds, to keep going. And you must have been persecuted within the hierarchy. They must be coming down on you every now and then. Tell us about it. And try not to be too long, because we want to get to some questions, but we would like to hear your story.
Very much.
Yeah, Penelope and John, can you hear me?
Yeah, very well. It's very good.
Yeah. So a big salute from Kerala, India, for organizing this wonderful meeting from across the globe. So there was a traumatic experience, but we are joining her struggle. And I, as a Catholic priest, I was engaged in people's struggle in Kerala, in India. I was the part of people's movements in India, in Kerala, especially from 2006 onwards. So when this particular incident happened, before the protest, the public protest was happening, I was supporting them from behind, as I was doing in all the people's movements. So once my colleagues in the protest asked me to head the public protest, I asked all other struggles. I was behind the screen, but here it dawned upon me that I should be in the forefront. Why? I come from the predator tribe. I'm a Catholic priest, and in Catholic Church, the person who make law, the legislator, the executive, and the judicial power, completely vest on the bishop and the clergy. And 2000 years back, it is the priests, the murderers of Jesus, the same tribe, the predator group, is continuing the act of killing Jesus. So I should be in the forefront, questioning there, because the silence of the majority is the most criminal act. Not the action by the omission. So I thought that I should be in the forefront, questioning the unquestioned power of the bishop. First time I met the sister, I told him, I don't have any compassion because you don't need my compassion because you are my leader. You are not a victim, you are not a servant, but you are my leader. Because so many women, so many nuns across the globe for years, they were raped, they were molested, and nobody was there to question the priestly class. So you are there as a friend runner for them. And you see, in 2018, the public protest began. And 14 days was the public protest. The public protest was began by the church renewal movement from within the Catholic Church. But within 2 or 3 days, the public of Kerala, beyond religion, beyond caste, beyond creed, beyond everything, about 700 organizations from, I think, for 14, 15 years, I am part of the people's movement across India, in Kerala especially. I have attended, a part of many struggles of people, especially the Dalit, Adivasi, environmental issues, human rights issues. But I have never seen the people pouring into the protest place. After the struggle around the globe, so many media persons, they came to meet me and the sisters. So I understood the reverberations this particular protest made in Kerala, India, around the globe. So, as a Catholic priest, is my bounden duty to be, unless and until why I became the front runner, because there is no point in continuing and being a priest, a Catholic priest in present day India, in the world.
Yeah.
So this is my story, and if you can ask any questions, I shall. So thank you.
Thank you very much,
Amazing.
Bertoli, because I think what you and Astrid and Virginia and Kotrani have said is that your Christian faith means that if you didn't support, you couldn't go on. That is an example of that their persecution is a persecution of Jesus. And so it's really lovely to hear. There are some very brave priests, but there aren't many, because we do know that the hierarchy punishes priests who step out of line. I don't actually know how you survive, but you do.
Well, I mean, what can I say? What everyone has said in the chat, which has been an extraordinary witness, really, and the struggle that people have had to find a way forward. And I mean, what can we say about your courage and how you brought people to you who now stand in solidarity, and this is a movement going forward. And we pray that somehow the church will listen. But I'm actually in a third space. I'm one of the people in the third space, where I'm connected with a group in America that have had to move into the third space, and they know about you in America, that the orders, the religious orders in America, and I think there might be some support coming through from there. So we're all in this together, but in different parts, shall we say. There's so much to say thank you for, but thank you to the Sisters in Solidarity. And, we're just glad to be with you. Thank you. It's been extraordinary. Thank you. As Emily Dickinson said, hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings a tune without the words and never stops at all. We hope and pray with our sisters who have suffered so much that the truth of all that has happened to them will emerge in full daylight. We hope and pray that this truth will result in deep reflection and change on the part of the Roman Catholic Church hierarchy, who have known for some time about the serious abuse that religious sitters suffer and have been unwilling to act to end the abuse. May the Spirit be with our sisters as they move forward in their courageous journey to be healed and free. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for being here with us.